Hey everyone, Christmas came early here at Breakpoint Labs because we're going to share some tips on improving vulnerability management programs through our experience performing various flavors of security assessments. As a quick caveat, this video is going to try to be like a quick 5-minute run through some tips, but before we jump into all that, it's very important in my opinion for security analysts to have a Linux background. A lot of tools run a Linux operating system, and being able to harness the power of Bash is really cool. Our last video actually showed a lot of these tips. It was designed just for that, giving you a quick overview of Linux environment. Here are two really useful use cases. One is actually doing a summarization of all the hashes for a domain controller given a hash dump from the domain controller. You can see examples of password reuse there. There was one password hash reused 161 times. That's an example of something you might be able to do in your vulnerability management program. If you can get a hash dump from the domain controller, you can actually check for password reuse across your area of your domain. Very useful. Then we also have down here this useful for loop, which is just a for I and cat file, which usually contains like IPs or URLs. Do this command and done. And that's really useful for tools that don't take in a list of IPs or URLs. Just they take a single IP, or you can for loop through it. And I find that very useful in a lot of tools. The first tip is just really understanding what tools to run beside your vuln scanner. When I talk to people doing vulnerability management programs, they tend to have a pretty good handle on their Nessus or their Nexpose or whatever vuln scanner they're using, Qualys, whatever it might be, but they often either don't have permission or don't have situational awareness of some of the other tools that they can leverage outside of that, whether it be to validate findings or find things that tool missed. And these are some examples of some things that I like to do. Nmap is still a very powerful tool, really awesome output, and I really like Nmap. It's usually one of the first things I check out if I'm on an internal network, and being stealthy is not a thing. But they also have various NSE scripts that turn Nmap into very much like a vulnerability scanner. So you can investigate those. A lot of times, a lot of bleeding edge vulnerabilities come out, and you can have an NSE script like Heartbleed potentially, before it gets released in your vuln scanners. It's very useful in the NSE scripting engine, Nmap scripting engine. There's also Metasploit. A lot of people associate Metasploit with exploits. That is certainly an exploit framework, but it also has various auxiliary scanner modules that you might not be aware of. So you can check out those modules, as those are designed for vulnerability or technology enumeration and not necessarily exploitation. So you can look into those, as those can be something that might fit in your rules of engagement for your vuln management program. Also, you want to investigate network shares. There's a lot of tools out there for that. I like SMB map enum for Linux. You can look at running a bunch of different tools across your default Windows image, right? So you might be able to just hack away and have some fun at your default Windows image and find a flaw that may be replicated across your environment. You can look at maybe privesc flaws with PowerSploit, PowerView, and see there might be some privesc paths potentially in your default Windows image. There's also Responder, which is really powerful for multicast poisoning, default setting in Windows, and you can run it in analyze mode to see if there's actually multicast traffic related to limner poisoning, related to limner on your network. And then also just being aware of all the web scanning tools. I think a lot of people don't really approach web technology appropriately with vuln management, and I'll have another slide going over that specifically. But the first thing, like I said, is understanding what's on your network. I run that Nmap scan. It usually gives me a really good idea of what's on the network, and you can identify, your technology. And what I'll usually try to do my first run through is I'll run a script across my Nmap scan, and I'll just try to pull out devices and appliances I know about, and I'll try default credentials, and I'll look through the versions that are enumerated and check out exploit.db. That is like literally one of the things that I do that tends to find a whole lot of stuff that the vuln scanners miss for whatever reason. I mean, that's just one of the things I do. It's a free tool, Nmap, and default creds and exploit.db can get you a long way, surprisingly. And that can fit in your vuln management program pretty easily, because generally you aren't doing you don't have to necessarily run the exploit, but you can associate, hey, this version is with this exploit, and it might be something to look into. Understanding your tech stack is very important. That helps with the understanding what exploits might be applicable. Way to do that is a lot of the tech stack you may be enumerating is web technologies across internal networks. What web's a really powerful tool to run across URLs. WAPalizer is a really nice browser plugin, and there's also Eyewitness, which is a really cool tool. It's Python-based by Chris Strunzer, works at Mandiant, and it's essentially a tool that basically gives you a snapshot of every web interface, or actually an RDP. It supports other protocols as well for that. so you can get a quick bird's eye view. But yeah, run your nmap, parse it, build your URL list, throw it to Eyewitness and WhatWeb, try your default creds, that kind of stuff. Very useful. Understanding your external footprint, tip 3. So what does the internet know about your organization? That's one of the questions you want to be able to answer as a security analyst doing vuln management for your company. If you have a very large company, you might have a very large external footprint, and you can usually find that information out pretty easily using census.io or Shodan. Census is free. They actually, I believe they both have paid versions now. They have APIs that you can, and Python modules, and even Shodan has like a tool you can install. A lot of good stuff there. And then also looking at Google View with various search operators. Recon Engine can help automate that, but sometimes you get hit with the CAPTCHA fun, which is not fun. But these are some good options for you to learn about external footprint. We do have a full blog on that if you want to learn more about it. Right there at the bottom. Also looking at your network share, something that I commonly see a lot of sensitive data when I go on a pen test. I see a whole bunch of goodies in the network shares. I spend a lot of time looking at network shares because a lot of people don't. So you'd be surprised how often once you get a set of credentials or even unauthenticated, how much access you have to network shares across a given environment. So start to look at that. There's a lot of sensitive stuff. You can find virtual machines. You can extract. I've actually found full database backups with credentials. I've found full source code with creds in it. It happens all the time. And for whatever reason, it's just one of the things that vuln scanners don't do a great job of checking. Address web applications appropriately. This is huge because when you look at your network vulnerability scanner, it's just that. It's a network vulnerability scanner. It's great at network type, arguably great at network type flaws, depending on who you talk to, right? It is one of those things that is, it's good for that, but not great for web. In my experience, I really love Burp Suite Professional. I live and breathe in that tool. It's really awesome. There's also Akinetics, which is a really good, inexpensive, automated vulnerability scanning tool. Understand that these tools can be a little more aggressive. They do try to fuzz the application inputs, and they could cause unexpected data in the database, potentially corruption of a database. So this might be something that you talk to your web admins about and get a clone, and then beat up on the clone with these vuln scanning tools. And find the vulnerabilities there versus just doing it in the production system. Just something to keep in mind of. Be mindful of the fact that these are certainly more aggressive than your network vulnerability scanners. But it is something that's very important to find web type flaws, because that is a very common way that my team gets around a network is exploiting web. Understanding what vulnerabilities are interesting to attackers, right? That's easier said than done, and that changes every day. And I think that's having a heartbeat on what's happening in the InfoSec community, making sure you're reading your news feeds and staying ahead of the latest and greatest, knowing when something comes out and being able to, enumerate that across your area of responsibility, and then take action prior to, just waiting for it to show up in a vuln scan report. I think is really important for a vuln analyst to be more proactive, and just something that you'll really have to have that steady plug on, what new vulnerabilities, what new exploits are coming out, and what are bad guys actually doing, and knowing what's your tech stack, right? If you have a bunch of Drupal sites, internet facing, keep a close eye on what Drupal vulns come out, what plugins are they using, what vulns are coming out for those plugins, and that would go a long way at keeping an organization from finding out through a bad guy exploiting them, right? And the website getting defaced. That's not a great way to find out you have a vuln. Also, understanding the impact of outdated Windows systems. A lot of times you have that Windows XP box over there for running that one, tool or whatever it might be that for backwards compatibility, but understand that the risk that exposes. I mean, these operating systems have like birthday cakes made at hacker conferences, right? And there's a reason for that, because you can if they're on your domain, you can easily get onto the box. MS28067, for example, potentially depending on the version of the operating system. You dump creds from memory, Mimikatz. You can grab hashes. You can pivot, and all equals to winning. Especially if there's a domain admin logged in or domain level credentials logged in, it's going to lead you to pivoting. If you get local admin on that box, is that local admin shared across your environment? Very often is, and you can move around and get domain admin through that mechanism. So it's just very, very interesting, very good to understand the risk that exposes, because a lot of people don't realize that it can lead to full domain compromise. Also understand your OPSEC failures. You as a security analyst can walk around your office, take a peek around things. Are people writing passwords on sticky notes? I see it on every single assessment over the last 10 years. There's got to be a reason for that, right? Because everybody does it. So you as a security analyst for your organization, there's nothing wrong with taking a quick, getting approval and walking through, doing just a quick walkthrough and seeing if there are passwords on sticky notes, and understanding that those OPSEC failures and what those expose from an insider threat perspective. If you can get a hold of somebody's credentials, you can assume their personality on the domain and do nefarious things. Also, have some fun. You might be able to pitch to your boss, phishing user awareness training. It doesn't have to be exploitation, right? You can do click analysis. You can suggest running a phishing campaign to say, hey, can we do just for click analysis, see who's going to click the link. I'm not going to do any exploitation, but that type of user awareness training is huge in your organization and will help you drive home the need, because no one thinks it's going to happen to them until it does. And once that happens to them, they're like, oh man, I guess they're much more paranoid about clicking links in emails, and then thusly you're going to see people aren't getting infected quite as much because that particular attack vector is going to be limited as your users will become more aware of the threat. Just something to think about and pitch to your bosses, because I know a lot of times vuln analysts don't get to do the fun phishing stuff because it's generally in the rules of engagement for a pen test, but you never know, you might be able to pitch it to your boss. And that's it. Those are some quick tips to think about over the holiday season, maybe implement next year in 2018. From your friends here at Breakpoint Labs, take it easy. Happy holidays. Thanks, guys.